Some people in this world are on the front lines of the struggle between good and evil, and some, like us, bear witness. I'm Therese Apel.
And I'm Nicole Crowell. You may have heard us as we worked on stories and series about law enforcement and crime. And it's safe to say we've seen some of the best and worst of human nature.
We decided there's no greater honor than bringing you the stories of the men and women who seek out the monsters, who speak for the victims, and who put the pieces together on some of the biggest Mississippi crime stories of our time. Welcome to Investigation Homicide. Hey guys, welcome to Investigation Homicide. I am Therese Apel. Today we're excited because we have both of my co-hosts here. Yeah. Nicole Crowell and Amanda Johansson are both here.
Yay. I'm so excited.
Yay. So, I was going to throw to one or the other of you.
We're just like happy to be here.
We're just happy to be here. Yay. So, that's because today it's an important story. And it's personally important to me. Because I ended up playing a part in this story. Many of you may remember in 2017 on Memorial Day weekend, so the anniversary is coming up. Headlines out of Brookhaven, Mississippi. Of course, we had 8 people who were killed by one gunman, and there were a lot of things that go behind that. So here to help me tell that story is District Attorney Brendon Adams, and you tried the case, but you were just an ADA at the time.
That's correct.
Yeah, so give us a little bit of your background, just so people kind of can know who you are.
I'm from Brookhaven. I've lived Brookhaven my entire life. I went to Mississippi State University, then I went to MC Law. I had the opportunity to go around to a number of places to work, but I took a position in a grant position with the district attorney's office. Wasn't making any money. I think my first year out of law school, I made $27,000, but I was doing something that I just loved to do. I'd interned with D for a couple years. It was interesting. I never saw myself as a trial lawyer, but I got the opportunity to intern with D. I took the position out of law school. That was in October of 2005, and I've been there ever since. In 2023, I had the opportunity to run for district attorney, and I was successful. So I'm going on 20 years now at the district attorney's office.
That's incredible. So I got to Brookhaven in about 2007. So you and I were close to the same time.
Yes, sure were.
So just to let y'all know, we go way back. And
that's right.
Those were some just weird days.
Back in the days when you were at other places, and we covered a lot of murder cases,
that's
so
right.
it was a lot of fun then.
It absolutely was. Sometimes when you grow up and you know more, things are not fun like they were when you were kids.
That's right.
So I'm going to go ahead and just start off on this story. I'm going to set the scene from where I got the phone call, because what we're talking about here is the biggest mass murder in Mississippi history. And the thing is, it got a lot of publicity, but it didn't get the publicity you would assume. And there are multiple reasons for that. But so I was asleep in my house in Flowood, Mississippi at 2 a.m., roughly, somewhere in that range. And I get a phone call, and it is a friend of mine who the source has never been revealed prior to this, and probably won't reveal him today, just out of continuity. For lack of anything better. Anyway, so he calls and he says, "Hey, you need to get to Brookhaven. We've got a deputy down." And I said, "Oh no, who is it?" And he said, "It's William Durr." So I got up, and I was kind of moving slow because I needed to wake up. Anyway, I get on the interstate. I'm going down I-55 at 105 miles an hour, and troopers are sucking me up. Because as I am driving, I've gotten another phone call. There are 3 other people dead on the same scene with William Durr. So I get there, and I'm being told that the suspect in this case has left with a hostage and is headed toward Macomb. So I get there, and in the meantime, somebody sent me a photo that says, "This is the guy we're looking for." So I'm talking to these guys on the scene. I know this is where Durr and 3 other people have died. And I called the sheriff, Steve Rushing, and I said, "I need you to confirm for me that this is the guy. And I'm going to send you this photo." And all of a sudden, all the radios on all the deputies around me lit up. And it said, "Attention, all units, the suspect is at 312 East Lincoln, and he has opened fire." And at that point, I jumped in my car. I didn't jump in my car. There was a long driveway, and luckily at the time I was working out with a guy that was making me sprint all the time. So I sprinted up the driveway, jumped in my Dodge Charger, and drove to 312 East Lincoln. There's a place where East Lincoln goes this way into the county, and it goes that way into the city. And in my head, because it had come over the county radio, I thought it was in the county. And I went and I noticed the numbers were going up, and I was in the wrong place. So I turned around and came back. And thank God, because as I was pulling up, other deputies were pulling up, and he was just hitting his knees, getting on the ground. So I just got out of the car. I'd lived in Brookhaven for years before I moved to Jackson, and they were used to seeing me at these scenes. So I get out of the car, I take out my phone, and I start to record, and he starts talking. So we'll get to that in a minute. Brendon, what was going on behind the scenes while all this was happening? Like, what did I not know?
Well, one of the main things that happened was, and a lot of people don't know this unless you were at the trial, is when Godbolt the first phone call I got, it was officer down. We don't know what his status is. We don't know if he's dead. We don't know if he's alive. There's been multiple gunshots. We're trying to make contact with him. We've made contact with him. He's telling us he's still in the house. And that's one of the main reasons officers at that time weren't able to go in, because we were still under the impression at this point it was a hostage situation. So they were setting a perimeter. They were going around. One of the chief deputy, Johnny Hall, actually got in touch with Godbolt and said, "Brother, you need to come out. You need to turn yourself in. Let's let these people go." And Godbolt told him, "I'm not coming out. Y'all will kill me." When he gets off the phone, he looks at the lady that, unbeknownst to us, he was actually on I-55 headed south towards Macomb with a hostage. And he looks at the hostage and he says, "I've bought myself some time. They think I'm still in the house." So from there is when, at this point, we can't go into the house. The next phone call that we get, he's on Coopertown Road about 20 miles from Bogachita. And they said that their shot's been fired. Officers go to the scene, and that's when they found Jordan Blackwell and Austin Edwards.
Yeah.
They found them deceased. This was a house full of kids. Luckily, most of the kids were still in the back of the house, and he did not know they were there. But these were kids from ages 2 to 20 were still in that house. He took another child hostage, and that's when they rode around for a period of time longer. He then goes to the home of Hank and Alfred Bracey, where he armed robs them. They were trying to get more gas for the car. The Xavier's credit card wouldn't work, so that's when they decided to go and steal another car. They stole the car, and from there is when they went to East Lincoln Road.
Sure. So obviously there's a lot going on here.
So much going on.
Yeah. Now, Nicole, I know you've sat here and you've listened to me talk about all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What was your impression when you heard about this case for the first time? Because I know you didn't know about it at the time. You learned about it after the fact.
Yes, right. So part of my whole lore is that I don't know anything about the news. And so I think the first time I ever heard about it is when we started Dark Horse, and you have the picture in your office of the arrest. And I was like, "Oh, that's a cool picture. What's that?" And she told me the story. And I feel like you're such a good storyteller, but I feel like even the first time you told me, you can't even tell somebody all the details in one sitting. Like, we could probably sit here for 3 or 4 podcasts, because there are so many details in this one. And every single time I read an article or watched or listened to anything while I was researching for this, I had to go back to my key of people, because I would read it and be like, "Who's that? Who is this?" But it's somebody who's already been introduced, and I know who they are, but there's just so many actors in this that it's so hard. But it's almost like he just did everything he could possibly. He didn't care.
Yeah. Amanda, as a cop, obviously, what are your thoughts to this point in the story?
Well, I didn't read a whole bunch up on this, because I like to kind of hear it for the first time whenever I'm sitting in the chair. So I am kind of curious how this all started. Was this a domestic situation? Was this just a killing spree with no, just because? I do kind of wonder where did all of this begin? Who hurt you? Right. That's
Right.
my thing.
The answers are yes, yes, and all of the above.
Yes. Right. So, and the answer to that, of course, is that we would find that out as we went. When I get to Coopertown Road and I start recording, he is talking about, it's like he looked over and he saw the camera. One thing we've all learned about Godbolt is that he is a showman. He is an idiot. He's a lot of things I can't say on here. Although when we watch the video, you'll see that he says them for me. So he starts talking, and as they're putting him in cuffs and as all this is going on, he continues to talk. So I continue to roll. At one point, I had to go into my phone and delete apps because it was before the cloud was a big thing. So I'm deleting things off my phone so that I can continue to take video. That's when we got this video that Daniel has. There were many that came before this. There were, I think, 8 or 9 videos overall, and this is the main one that we use. So, Daniel, if you would roll that.
You the police, ma'am?
I'm the media.
Ain't nobody gonna see about me?
Somebody's seeing about you right now.
Huh?
Somebody's seeing about you right now.
I can't hear you.
They're seeing about you right now.
I fucked my eardrum up, man, shooting that gun. I can't hardly hear.
You want to say why you did all this?
Huh?
You want to say why you did all this?
Huh?
Do you want to say why you did all this?
Because I love my wife and love my children.
They asked him if he can to pull it from the front, and I'll drive it on down there.
I love my wife and love my children. I love Boca Chittum. My aunties and uncles, they raised me right. They instilled the right morals and values in me.
So what about Deputy Durr's wife and children?
I'm sorry. You tell her. My words would never forgive her. God will give her comfort. Seek Jesus. God will give her comfort. My father died when I was 16. Love conquers a multitude of sin. If she can find it in her heart, it may not be tomorrow. It may not be when I'm dead.
But you
She
know
can
too,
find
because
it in
your
her
dad
heart
was a
before she
cop who
died
was
to
killed, right?
forgive me. Heaven will be her home.
Was your dad was a cop too, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Was he killed also?
Yes, ma'am.
So you know what her family's going
I
through.
know exactly what she's going through.
So why would you do
I
that?
suffer through the pain every year.
Why would you do that to someone then?
My pain wasn't designed for him. He was just there.
So you're saying he was kind of collateral damage?
We was talking about me taking my children, and her sister and auntie called the police. I was having a conversation with her stepdaddy and her mama and her, my wife, about me taking my children home. And somebody called the office. People that didn't even live at the house. But that's what they do. They intervene. They cost him his life. I'm sorry.
So what's next for you?
Death.
So
Death. Death. My intentions was to have y'all to kill me. I ran out of bullets.
it's a good thing they showed mercy.
Suicide by cop was my intention. I ain't fit to live. Not after what I done. Not in y'all eyes and not in nobody else's eyes. But God, you know, He forgives you for everything.
Spoiler alert. Brendon, did he run out of bullets?
No, he did not.
How many bullets did he have left?
I believe he still had a magazine that was still full of bullets in his pistol. Now, he did run out of his AR and his AK, but if suicide by cop was his mission, my question would be, why did he leave all the guns inside the house? Mm-hmm. Why did he come out, put his hands up, and comply with all? Corey Godbold is a bully. Corey Godbold is a narcissist. He only cares about Corey Godbold. And one of the things we were talking about earlier is what started all this. It was Corey Godbold wanting to control everything. Corey wanted to control everybody. He wanted to control his wife. He wanted to control his family. And when he saw that he could no longer control his wife, he decided that if he couldn't hurt her, he was going to hurt everyone around her. And that's what the theme of our trial was for this entire trial was a night of rampage of, if you can't hurt her, I'm going to hurt those around her. He murdered her mother. He murdered her aunt. He murdered her sister. He murdered her best friend's 2 children. He murdered her aunt. He murdered her husband. So this was a night about hurting those that he couldn't get to her, so he was going to hurt those around her.
Now, was she was in the house when he first got there where Durr was killed, correct?
That's correct. What had all happened is he went over that night. Like I said, it was Memorial Day weekend. The kids were over. They were spending the night. He went over to the house to collect the children. My mom said, look, let them stay. They're shooting fireworks. We're cooking out. Just let them stay. She had already left him a couple weeks prior and had been staying with mom. So he was already mad at her when she said that, if you try to come over here, you try to take the kids, we're going to call the law. And that's exactly what she did. And they called Officer Durr that night.
So one thing we do know about this also is that during the time that he was shooting Officer Durr and Brenda May, Barbara Mitchell, and Takara May, now Sheena was getting out the back window, right?
That's correct. Sheena was getting out the back window. She had run down the hallway and gone into a back bedroom that had an outside window. She basically busted that window out and threw her children out the window, and then she climbed out. She actually got a number of cuts on her arms and legs from where she went out the window. Godbold's father-in-law was still in the house, and there was in the house with one other lady. So they were in another bedroom, and they were trying to get the police's attention to let them know that what was going on, but they were also at the same time, the house looked like a firing range. There were bullet holes throughout the entire house. Godbold, when he shot everybody, like I said, he ran out of bullets the first time. He went back out to his car. That's when he got the AR and the AK, and he came back in and just shot everybody. I think the person that was shot the fewest number of times in that house was Deputy Durr, and that was only 3 times.
There was nothing personal in that one for him.
No.
Yeah. So that said, one thing that I know we talked about a lot was that he didn't shoot anybody he didn't kill.
That's exactly right. He did attempt to shoot one of the other deputies that arrived on scene, and that's when he went back into the house. But five more minutes, and he would have killed another deputy. We would have had 2 deputies that have been killed.
So he goes from there to the house where he kills Jordan Blackwell and Austin Edwards. Austin was 11 years old. Jordan Blackwell was 18. He was a football star. He was on track to go to play football at JSU. Jordan is the one, this is a hard story all the way around, but Jordan is the one that always makes me cry because he was at some point shielding his cousin, his 15-year-old cousin, Caleb Edwards, from the bullets. And so there were a lot of stories of heroism in this.
That's exactly right. And Austin was doing, and I may get a little emotional myself,
Yeah.
but this was it was a situation where Austin, one of the things I remember about the trial was Austin's dad, when he testified at the trial at the victim impact, said, Austin told him, he said, Dad, everywhere I go, people know me because of you. He said, one day when I'm a football star, people are going to know you because of me. And that just that was one of the other things that it showed that Austin was a hero. Mm-hmm. Austin was helped saving people. And this was pure evil on the part of Corey Godbold.
Well, and so he shot his way into the house knowing the parents weren't there.
That's exactly right. He knew exactly where the parents were. He had sent a message to the parents from Sheena's telephone, basically telling them, you've messed up my family, and now I'm about to mess yours up. And they were all kind of sitting around like, what are they talking about? Because the family had gone down to try to comfort Sheena at the house on Lee Avenue, and they had left everybody at Coopertown Road. It was only when the kidnapped victim got away that she was able to call and say, look, he's not in the house anymore. He's on Coopertown Road. So that was the first time that we knew that he's not in the house anymore. So resources were already starting to get stretched thin. We had to send people from Lee Drive to Coopertown Road. We had to keep people on Lee Drive because at this point, they were finally getting to go into the house to see the level of carnage that was inside the house. And that's where they found Deputy Durr.
Sure. Okay, so if you're watching right now, if you're watching live, you can put comments and questions on Facebook, and we'll see them. So if you have any questions for us, feel free to ask. Nicole and Amanda, do y'all have any questions or any comments at this point?
Right now, I think I'm just sitting here.
Since we're talking about the really sad story part,
Yeah.
The whole thing is absolutely tragic. But when I was reading through the court documents, the law article that you had sent us, the part that really got me choked up, and it's hard to do, is when it said that Durr had his ring, was holding his ring to his chest.
His wedding ring.
His wedding ring to his chest, right? So he had survived the initial gunshot and then crawled a little bit of a way, took his wedding ring off and clutched it to himself. And I was like, if I I was a wife in that situation, I would never stop thinking about that.
It was that was kind of one of those things that we were kind of hoping that we were going to be able to spring on the defense at trial, but unfortunately the judge kind of backdoored us a little bit.
Yeah.
But basically what happened was the first shot that hit Deputy Durr was directly in the face.
Mm-hmm.
And it was much more than just superficial, but it was not life-threatening.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor said with medical treatment, he could have been fine. That is when, through expert testimony, we were able to determine that it looked that Deputy Durr had his hands out in front of him and was pulling forward because blood was starting to pool up on the inside of his arm, where if he was laying flat, it would just be one level, smooth surface. But when he went to pull himself up, it was making an arching motion on the inside of the arm. So that is when our theory was that Deputy Durr was attempting to get up.
Sure.
Godbolt went back out to the house, went back out to the car, got another rifle, and he came back and he shot Deputy Durr directly in the face. I mean, not in the back.
Mm-hmm.
He had a bulletproof vest on, and the bullet went into the vest and kicked to the right. Once again, he would have been able to live through that. And that is when we still believe that Deputy Durr had gotten his ring off and was clutching it in his hands, still trying to get up when Godbolt shot him in the back of the head. So
Godbolt was not going to let anybody live. So from Coopertown Road, he takes Xavier Lilly hostage. He goes to East Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
That is where what we know. Again, we see a little glimpse of heroism here because he goes in and he finds Sheila Barrage and her husband Farrell.
that's right. When he gets to the house, basically, Sheila was on the telephone with somebody, and she heard her dog start barking. She's wondering what's going on. Farrell, they had been up all night, so they kind of knew. Farrell looks outside and sees Corey Godbolt coming up. They have basically a shootout through the garage door and bedroom door, which had been turned. The garage had been turned into a bedroom, so they had a shooting that went through the garage door. At that point, Farrell was just outgunned. He had a single pistol where Corey still had an AR, an AK, and a pistol. Farrell was able to wound, as you saw in the video, that he did have a bandage. I believe it was on his right arm. Mm-hmm. And Corey comes into the house, shoots Farrell a few more times, and then he just stalks through the house looking for more people. And through DNA and testing and blood spatter, we were able to trace him as he walked completely through the house, opening doors up, opening closets up, looking around. There was actually a 4-year-old that was hiding underneath the little kitchenette and hoping that he wouldn't see her. When he went back, he went into the closet where Miss Sheila was actually cowered down, hiding, and that's when he executed her in her closet.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it means something to me that Farrell got a piece of him.
That's right.
How
So-
were they related? Because everybody else that he shot, like I can see the connection. How were they connected?
Farrell
And Godbolt.
they were friends of Sheena.
Okay. So he was just anybody he could think of
Anybody that had tried to help Sheena get away
at any
from
point
him.
in time.
Anybody that was trying to help his wife is who he was trying to hurt. He
Okay.
couldn't get to her. Like I said, Sean and Tiffany Blackwell, they were close family friends of Godbolt. He went after their kids.
Do you think he had a list already pre-planned, or do you think he was just going to the first one, being like check, and then going to the next one check?
I think that he was. It was just a where can I go next?
Yeah.
I don't think he had any type of predetermined list. I think he went here, did what he did, then he thought, how can I do it next?
Mm-hmm.
Because between Lee Drive and Coopertown, the man that he was with and the kidnap victim almost had him talked into turning himself in. And at some point he says, no, I'm not going to the sheriff's department. Take me to Sean and Tiffany's house. And that's when he went and murdered the children.
So we do have a question from Debbie Durr. This is William Durr's mom. Their family has become close friends of mine, and I love them dearly. And I know through this, one thing that happened for all of us was that Brookhaven really pulled together. I think all of us we obviously lived through something. But to Ms. Durr's question.
Unfortunately, no, he is not. He has done his first direct appeal. It was denied by the Mississippi Supreme Court. They filed a motion for rehearing. It was denied. He did file cert to the United States Supreme Court. It has been denied. However, at this point, he still has what we call post-conviction relief motions that he can attempt to file. I'm not anticipating any different of an outcome, but there are still other post-conviction relief type motions that can be filed. And I know that's not the answer that anybody wants to hear, but that's just the way it is.
How the system works.
Since we're talking about appeals and you're going into kind of the court process, I know we're jumping ahead to the trial, but can you explain what he was found guilty of, what he was sentenced of, and what the appeals are that he's applying for?
Well, he was indicted on a 12-count indictment, 4 counts of capital murder, 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted murder, 1 count of armed robbery, and 2 counts of kidnapping. We went to trial. The trial lasted right at 3 weeks. He was found guilty of all counts. They sentenced him to life on all 4 of the first-degree murders. He was sentenced to life on the attempted murder of Deputy Keys. He was sentenced to life on the kidnapping of Xavier Lilly. He was sentenced to 20 years on the kidnapping of LaPetra Stafford and 20 years on the armed robbery of Hank and Alfred Bracey. After that process, we then started the sentencing phase of a capital murder case, which is where we were trying to decide death or life without the possibility of parole. He was found guilty and sentenced to death on all 4 capital murder convictions. So at this point now, he is, like I said, it's been to the Supreme Court. It was affirmed. It was a 10-2 decision. We only had 2 Supreme Court justices that said that he probably deserved another trial. The other 10 said no, that he got a fair trial. Everything was done by the book. He then applied for the United States Supreme Court to take a look at his case, and the United States Supreme Court said no. So there's other motions that can possibly be filed. He could possibly try to say he had ineffective assistance of counsel. He could possibly say that he needed a psychological evaluation. There's a number of different motions that he could potentially try to file, and he's tried to file them before, and I hope that I don't have anything else to do with this.
Now, Brendon, I don't like to ask questions about myself, but what were they trying to get done when it came to the appeal, but also during the trial, as far as the videos that I took? They did not like that.
They did not want your videos at all. And that's one of the things when we prepared for this trial for almost 3 years, and we came to the conclusion that the way we were going to start our trial front and center was your videos. And they basically were trying to make the argument that this alleged source that you had, that still to this day, I don't even know who it is, this alleged source basically made you a state actor, and you were acting under the scope of law enforcement. So therefore, all of your videos, all of your testimony, all of your statements should be suppressed. Right. Our argument the entire time was, she's a journalist. She's doing what journalists do. She's got a phone call. She's following up on a lead, and it led her here. Mm-hmm. And that's the way the Judge Strong and ultimately the Supreme Court ended up ruling with us as well.
Yeah, and just for those of you that don't know how it works, you get a phone call. A lot of my sources are police officers. A lot of them are firemen. A lot of them are EMS. Across the board, I always say that at this point I've got plausible deniability. Like, anybody that is my source is safe because I have so many sources that are within these realms. I just want to add that the only reason that I didn't divulge my source was because the defense was so ugly in the way they handled it. If they would have just called me and said, "Hey, can you tell us who your source was?" My source was fine with me telling. He just called and said, "Hey, we've got a deputy down." I don't get that call, but I get tips all the time just like that. Mm-hmm. And so he didn't do anything wrong. There was nothing but the fact that they tried so hard to compel, and we had a whole hearing about calling all the deputies up, like, what's your relationship to Ms. Apel? They were not ever going to get that from me, not unless the judge told me to. And
that's one of the things that they were doing throughout the entire trial is, we felt confident throughout our entire trial that we were going to get guilty verdicts. We felt as though this trial isn't necessarily about guilt or not guilt. This trial was about the death penalty, and that's the mindset that we kind of went into it with. We knew we had the evidence. We knew we had multiple pieces of evidence at every scene and at every victim that tied Corey Godbold to them. There wasn't just one piece of evidence here that maybe tied him. We had eyewitnesses. We had ballistics. We had DNA. We had your recordings. So we had multiple things. So the defense was fighting from day one, let's do everything we can to keep them from getting the death penalty. And we were fighting tooth and nail because that was our objective. We met with all the family members beforehand, and we talked to them one-on-one and as a group, and we said, what do y'all want to see happen out of this? And all of them were happy with going with the death penalty, and that's the road that we chose to go.
Sure. Well, and I want to say that in some of the other videos that we didn't show, he says things like at one point a deputy is kneeling on the back of his leg, and he says, "Get this fool off my leg, and I'll tell you where the bodies are. People are dying as we speak because he won't get off my leg." So he didn't just confess to Durr's murder.
That's right.
He talked about a lot of things.
And he was still trying to be manipulative throughout the entire time. Yeah. And he tried that throughout the entire trial. I don't know if you remember when he got up in closing arguments, our judge let him do a portion of his own closing argument. Mm-hmm. And at that point, he even starts, and that was the only time that I got frustrated with our judge throughout the entire trial was he was continued to argue facts that weren't in evidence. And I would have to stand up and say, "Objection, Your Honor, he can't do that. He's got to stick with what's in evidence." But he's manipulative. He wanted his day in the sun. Mm-hmm. He wanted everybody to know that this is about Corey Godbold. And he still feels that way today.
He does. And at one point and we just talked to somebody about a similar case like this the other day, but at one point he stretched his arms out and compared himself, like in a cross motion, and compared himself to Jesus. And at that point, you felt it. Do you remember how we felt to that in the court? It's almost like God himself said, "No, sir." Just like I felt it in my body when he did that.
We were watching, of course, where we were sitting. I was sitting directly in front of the jurors. You could see it on the jurors' faces.
Good.
They were not buying anything that was being said. Some of them were closing their eyes. Some of them were lowering their heads. When the defense attorneys were talking, they were being attentive. But when Godbold got up and began his allocution, they didn't want to hear it. They didn't care. And they would, like I said, lower their head, close their eyes. They had tuned him out completely.
Sure.
Speaking of the jury, what in the world did y'all do for voir dire?
We kidnapped 16 people from DeSoto County.
Uh-huh. How
for
do you
3
even
weeks.
go through the process of choosing these jurors, considering how much media attention it got, considering there were so many people involved, considering this was a small community? How do you make sure that there is a non-biased
fair
jury,
and
a
impartial
fair
jury.
and impartial jury in this case?
What we did is our judge moved the case to the farthest north part of Mississippi that he could move it to, and that was in DeSoto County.
Okay.
We went up. We started jury selection on a Monday. We did general voir dire, which is basically just getting excuses, going through, making sure people can serve, they're over 21, financial hardships, things like that. And then we started individual voir dire, which lasted the next 5 days. So at the end of the voir dire, we basically kidnapped 16 people and drove them back to Pike County to have the trial. And I think about it in today's world. Imagine that you show up at court and then you're told, we're going to kidnap you for the next 3 weeks. By the way, leave your iPad, leave your telephone, leave every communication device that you have behind. You're going to a hotel room. And, oh, by the way, you're not going to have TV. You're not going to have a television. We'll get you some books and some board games, but that's where you're going to be for the next 3 weeks.
Therese, how does that sound to you? Does that sound like a vacation or does that sound stressful?
Well, that sounds amazing to me, but I'm not them.
Just the process of going and not having to be connected to anything, I'm sure sounds great to you, but not the whole having to go be a juror on something like this.
Yeah.
Actually batshit crazy.
Yes. Well, and so you brought up the jury, Brendon, and I want to talk about the jury because one of the things, and I think we should go into this next, one of the things that we saw through this case, I can't talk about it without crying, is how much this community pulled together and how much love there was between the families and the community, and I mean, even Corey's family, you know, across the board, there was so much just understanding and so much compassion. And the jury became part of our family. I still stay in touch with several of them.
I do too. So, you know, it was, you're exactly right. It was one of those situations where we had people from all different parts of the community. This was one of the few times in my career that I have actually seen a community come together like this. White, black, it doesn't matter. Everybody came together and everybody became one big family. And like you were saying, a big monument was put up at the corner of Bogachita Road and Highway 51. At the dedication of that, we had 12 of the jurors drive back down to DeSoto County, from DeSoto County, to be there for that monument, to see that, to interact with the family, to let the family know that, you know, we don't see y'all every day still, but we're still thinking about you. We're still praying for you. And that still means a lot to me because I still see some of these jurors. I still talk to some of these jurors. And it always means good when you hear from them. They ask how you're doing, how the family is, how is Brookhaven doing, how is Bogachita doing. So this was a time when a community came together like nothing I've ever seen. They did community walks. They still go out to the monument and help clean up, things like that. So it truly was, not only did it bring a community together, it essentially brought a state together. So.
Right. Well, so the other thing that we have run into since it was over is that Corey kept getting cell phones in prison.
Oh, I forgot about this.
You remember some of this.
Yes, I forgot. Let's go. Okay.
Yeah. So he gets these cell phones in prison, as they will do, and he was making Facebook pages, and he made a Facebook page that was like, he called it his advocacy page. And I think he had some women on the outside that were helping him and running it. And he was saying that it was them that were making the comments and whatnot. But some of them he sent to Sheena were very personal and used nicknames that he had called her and things like that. I mean, he was, and I feel like there was an Instagram too. There were several things like that. So multiple times we had to have people go get those phones from him.
Yes, I know I made several phone calls to the Commissioner Burl Cain and saying, look, there was one time when he was even on a radio broadcast out of Atlanta, Georgia, that we're all sitting there going, how is this guy, what is he on? And at first somebody tried to say, oh, well, he's on a prison phone. Well, no, he's not. He's on a cell phone. So we were having to get, for a while, we were about once a week, we were having to make a phone call and do a shakedown of his cell and try to get whoever was bringing the cell phones to him away from him.
Yeah, and we haven't had that problem in a long time.
It's been a while since I've heard from any family members that said they've had any contact or dealing with him. So maybe they've got something working correctly.
Knock on wood.
That's it.
So what other parts of the story do you feel are important that we haven't told?
You know, one of the things that I still think about is the way that law enforcement worked together on this.
Yeah.
I mean, Sheriff Rushing was thrust into a night that I would never wish on anybody. But, you know, Brookhaven, Lincoln County, we're a small community. We had only a handful of deputies that were on duty that night. And then all of a sudden, we have 8 people that have been murdered. Yeah. Seeing law enforcement brothers come in, we had every county that surrounded Lincoln County, we had deputies there. Every federal agency, we had state agencies. It was just so good to see law enforcement officers getting up in the middle of the night and coming to another county that was in need. Yeah. We were having to contact state agencies from the coast to do crime scene processing. We were having to call crime scene units from Jackson to get them, because like we had 3 major crime scenes, all with multiple people had been killed. So resources were being stretched thin, and it was just so refreshing to see all of our law enforcement officer partners coming together, working together. On some of the videos that you can go back and you can watch, the video you showed, you saw probably about 10 or 12 officers. But there's some of those videos where you see upwards of 50, 60, 70 officers that are standing on scene. So it was always good to see that and see law enforcement agencies coming together in times of need.
Well, and you say that, I remember I was, and I should say that right after the situation, I had journalists from all over the country contacting me saying, how did you get that kind of access? And I wanted to tell them all that's what happens when the cops trust you. But it also was because I had lived in Brookhaven for about 4 years, and I was a volunteer firefighter, and so I was on both sides of the tape, depending on the day. So they were used to seeing me on these scenes. They trusted me. They knew that I was going to be fair one way or the other. And I remember as we stood there, I remember a state agent saying to me, "You know what the body count is right now?" And I said 4. And he said 8. And I said 8. And he said 8. And I was like, wow. And I just kept thinking, I don't know of anything that big ever.
And that was me. I remember the morning that all this happened. I remember the first phone call that I got, and they said, "We have an officer that's not responding, and there's a house full of people." At this point, we don't know. The next phone call I get is we have 6 people are killed. One of them is Deputy Durr, and there's 5 others. I get dressed. I'm almost into town. The phone rings again. We've got 2 more that are deceased. So we were dealing with 8 people, and they were all over the county. This wasn't in one little small area of the community. This was some in the south part of the county, some in the east part of the county. So resources were stretched thin, and we were just doing the best we could with everything we had.
Talk about the ballistics angle of this, because, I mean, you had 3 crime scenes that were major, but you also had hundreds of bullets at each place.
We were talking about this the other day when I did a presentation. I think we entered in 520 pieces of evidence in the trial. Of that, probably close to 200 were either shell casings, fragments, projectiles, pieces of projectiles. We had bullets from not only Corey's pistol, but we had bullets from his AR. We had projectiles and casings from the AK. We also had projectiles that came from Farrell Barrage's gun in the gunfight that he had. So it was just, I want to think it was around 250 different pieces of evidence that was ballistic related. The ballistics expert was able to testify to a reasonable degree of certainty that all of the AR and AK bullets came from Godbolt's guns. He was even able to determine which of the pistol rounds came from Farrell's gun compared to what came from Corey's gun. So it was a massive undertaking. I believe that witness was actually on the stand for close to 2.5 hours, just going through the process of getting the bullets into evidence and going through everything.
2 of the things that were said at trial that really stuck with me one was the text that he sent to Tiffany Blackwell that basically, forgive me, but I'm pretty sure the wording was something like, "Bitch, you fucked up my family, now I'm going to fuck up yours." So that was so just bone chilling. The other one was one of his friends testified toward the end, and he had been at a cookout a year before and said that if she ever tried to leave him again and they called the cops, he'd kill the cops and then he'd kill everybody else.
That's right. They actually, even in the sentencing phase, they actually hired what they called a mitigation expert to basically come in and say why Corey did not deserve the death penalty. And it was borderline comical. I don't know how much of that you were in for, but this guy considered him, I nicknamed him the human lie detector because he could tell when Corey was lying to him compared to when Corey was lying to other people. And this guy came in and he basically tried to say that the reason Corey did all this is because he had a complex that he developed before he was born, that his parents were divorced. So he said that. He also tried to say that because Corey's dad didn't live with him. Now, Corey still saw his dad every day, still had a good relationship with his dad every day, but because he didn't see his dad every day, that there was this complex, and that's what drove Corey to be a womanizer and a control freak. So the doctor tried to testify to a number of things, and like I said, it didn't go anywhere with the jury. They saw completely through it. But that was some of the reasons, that was some of the things that they did as far as mitigation things. They wanted to try to say why Corey shouldn't be put to death. And it was, like I said, it was comical.
Wasn't Corey's dad also shot by?
Corey's dad was also a police officer that was killed. I think Corey was about 14 when that happened.
Didn't his mom, or
Yes.
what was the situation there? Girlfriend
Girlfriend killed him.
Wait, rewind.
Corey's dad's girlfriend killed him.
So it wasn't a line of duty
Oh,
death.
No, it was not
okay,
a line of
okay.
duty death. No.
Thank you.
We always assume.
Yeah, well,
We just
I was
assume,
just
yeah.
Yeah.
interesting.
So I had a question that I was going to ask off that, but
I have a question for you.
Go.
I've watched you be a reporter for a while now, and it was I love watching your interviews. This one felt different to me because I want to know this part. You knew in that moment when you were interviewing him what he had done. He had killed your friend. He's bleeding. He's getting arrested. Why did you give him a voice in that moment?
I think it's okay for me to say this now. He had been talking so much. He had said so much that incriminated himself. As soon as he looked at me and said, "Ma'am, are you the police?" I thought, keep talking, MFer. Just keep talking.
All right.
And I think I've had several people comment on how calm I seem. And I don't know what that was. If you know me, you could hear in my voice that, like, I'm not okay, you know, but.
Well, when you like snap back at him a couple times, like you don't really snap at people, you know, like I've never.
They're seeing about you now.
Yeah, right. They're saying about you now, and then I'm the media. I told him, and every time he asks a question 3 or 4 times, you have your voice, and I'm like, hell yeah, that's fucking Therese. That's sick.
I feel like you can feel the shift.
Yeah.
In when he's like, "Are you a cop?" And you're like, "Oh, I have got you now." No, sir, I am not a cop. I am the media. Please let me help you. Help
Just
me
keep
help
talking.
you.
And knowing Corey, but that's what Corey wanted. Corey wanted that audience. He wanted to be able to tell his side of the story. And little did he know that we were going to bash him over the head with it in trial and things like that, because he talked about, apologize to that officer's family. He wasn't part of my plan.
Yeah.
And I did this for my wife. I did this. So Corey, like I said, he's a narcissist. He's a bully. He wants his 15 minutes, and that's what he thought he was getting that morning.
Well, and I want to talk too about one of the things. So it was ultimately, I mean, you know, I got diagnosed with complex PTSD, which so many of us have. But I realized I needed help during the Parkland shooting in Florida in 2018. And these kids are getting shot, and we're watching it on TV, and everybody in the newsroom is fighting over gun control. And I'm just like, y'all don't know what it looks like when somebody gets shot with an automatic weapon. You don't know what it looks like when this is going on. You hadn't been at one of these. I mean, I hadn't been at one of those scenes, but I felt so much in my heart, you know, it felt the same. And so that's when I realized, like, gosh, I need help. But one of the first things that I walked through with my therapist, he said, talk to me about being on that scene and talking to him. And he said, you know, what comes to your mind? And I said, the fact that everyone acted like it was this big victory for me, but it broke me, you know? And he was talking about, my therapist used to work with juvenile criminals. And as you guys know, when you talk to someone who is fresh off a murder, there is a whole different air around them, just a whole different aura. And my therapist said, if you could describe in a picture what that felt like, an unrelated picture, what did you feel like? And this is a weird thing, but I think about it so much. I said, I felt like one of those little cartoon knights that we saw when we were kids, and his helmet's so big that it's like all that sticks out from the bottom of his feet. And he's got a great big shield, and he's underneath it, and there's this dragon blowing fire down on him, and he's just hoping that the shield protects him. And my therapist said, that is a soul wound. And you can get that sometimes in these situations. He said, I treat a lot of cops that have the same situation. You're just touched in your heart by that evil. And that's something that, like, when I got on my rampage about Corey Godbolt will not have a cell phone, it was because I just didn't want him to be able to keep doing that to
That's
people,
right.
because I knew what that was.
And that's why, you know, one of the things that I try to think about is I don't give him his 15 minutes anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I think about how he brought a community together.
Yes.
I think about William Durr. I think about how William was a ventriloquist. William was a Mississippi State Bulldog. Just like I am, we would sit on the back porch. We would talk about the Bulldogs. We had good days. We had bad days. Mm-hmm. William was a great guy. He was a great deputy. He was a great father. He was a great son. He was a great everything. I think about Austin.
Yeah.
I think about what his mom talked about, how he was the life of the party. He loved to dance. He loved to he wanted to make everybody smile. I think about Jordan. I think about what Jordan said to his dad. Mm-hmm. He was an outstanding football player, and he had the brightest future. And he died protecting somebody. And then I think about Miss Sheila, and I think about she died hiding, hoping that she would get to see her family again. She had just started a new business. She was a great woman. That when people talk about Corey Godbold, and I have to read his appeals, and I have to read about him in the newspaper, I don't think about him anymore. I think about bringing a community together.
Yeah, and that's a really good way to look at it. We've got comments up here from Vincent Mitchell, Barbara Mitchell, who was one of the victims, was his wife. That's Sheena's mother. Kayla Hubbard says, find something else to talk about. It doesn't always work like that, Kayla, but when you read the articles that I've written since Corey has been imprisoned, most of them just call him the convict. So that's a part of things. That's kind of how we do things. So that said, I guess in the end, Brendon, what's the takeaway?
The takeaway is that, there's so much that can be taken away from this. You look back at the number of people that were lost and the amount of hurt, the amount of pain that went through our community. But looking back, you see how much stronger we came out. Yeah. You see how much stronger law enforcement came out, how much stronger the district attorney's office came out. Mm-hmm. You look how much stronger the new family bonds were built. And like I said, it wasn't a black thing. It wasn't a white thing. It was a community. Yeah. It was brothers. It was sisters. It was aunts. It was uncles. Everybody came together. We have jurors that still we talk to. I guarantee you, if they knew we were doing something on Memorial Day weekend at the monument, we would have some show up. Sure. So my takeaway is this. We went through a lot of pain. We went through a lot of suffering, but a lot came out of it, and a lot of good came out of it.
So, and I have watched you try other murder cases. Talk to me about, what did this do for you as a prosecutor?
This was probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I mean, it was, I'm not an emotional person, but this was one of those things when you're looking at children, when you're looking at someone's mom, when you're looking at a person that you know and you're a good friend with. So this was, on a certain level, this was personal to me. This was William Durr. Like I said, we were friends. Then you look at these children, and then you look at an unarmed woman that is hiding in her closet. It was very personal to me. This was also a big learning tool for me. I've learned so much. I hope I never have to do this again. But in the event that ever does happen, we'll be that much more prepared for it. And I had so much help from so many people. I know last week Bubba Bramlett was on your show. I came and sat down with Bubba because they had just finished a big capital murder trial in Madison. And I came and sat down with him about 6 months before this trial, and he was just a wealth of information for me, and he was very hospitable. Went to DA's offices on the coast. I mean, seeing a brotherhood that came together, we were able to put on a great case. And like I said, it was affirmed by the Supreme Court, and I think we did an outstanding job.
I think y'all did too. I watched.
So,
Nicole, closing thoughts?
I just want to say thank you, because I know that this is hard to talk about for both of you guys. I know this was a big one for you, Therese. I know that it brings up a lot of emotions every time. And every time I say it, I just can't imagine. I'm really grateful for these experiences so that I get to kind of learn secondhand. But again, all I can say right now is just thank you. There's just too many victims, too many emotions. It's such a big story that deserves, I think some of these people just deserve peace. And I think that, do we know, actually I do have a question. Do we know when somebody is going to be executed if they have the death penalty? Are they going to be executed? What is that? How does that work?
I will stay alive just to see it.
I will stay alive just to see it. But, I will tell you this. We're getting ready to do an execution. I believe it's in July, and the person's been on death row longer than I've been alive.
No way.
So, we're talking about a 45, 46-year-old, 46 time period.
So it could happen that he just dies.
It could very possibly happen that he just dies in the penitentiary. Now, once all his appeals are exhausted, and that, like I said, that just depends on what all is filed. There are lawyers out there that they will do everything they can, file every motion that's possible to keep him alive a little bit longer. So,
Amanda, closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's great that y'all focus so heavily on I hate to say the positives, but the things that did come out of this tragedy that has benefited the community. And honestly, I know both of y'all just sat here and said, like, you will live long enough to watch him be executed. I personally pray that when he finally reaches the day that he is executed, he looks out into that viewing room and there's not a single soul there, because that's all he wants is the attention. He is a narcissist. And I hope that all of y'all find the peace so that y'all, like, that's not what y'all want to do on a, I don't know. I feel like that's a Monday kind of thing. You get executed on a Monday.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And then we can party for the rest of the
You're
week.
probably exactly.
You're probably so right, though.
But yeah, I hope that he looks out into that viewing room and there's not a single person there that cares enough to waste the time to watch him be executed.
So, and that said that you said that when he was doing all this stuff with the cell phone and we were all talking back and forth, at one point it was just kind of a group consensus, like, as long as we keep responding and getting upset, he's going to keep doing it.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So we also have another message from Vincent Mitchell. This is a tough time of year, but I'm glad their memory is being kept going. And to me, that's why we still talk about this. My closing thought is this. When I was at WLBT, and I'm just going to tell this story. It just is what it is. The first week of the trial, I was sick. I had COVID. There was a point even in the courtroom where I got to coughing so bad I had to leave the courtroom. But so I didn't go. Meanwhile, they were saying, we need you to get back so we can cover this flooding in Jackson. And I was like, the most important murder trial of Mississippi history is going on an hour south, hour and a half south. Why are we not covering it? They're like, we'll go for the last day. And I was like, no. So when I got well, I just called them and I said, I'm taking the company vehicle and my laptop and a camera, and I'm going to Brookhaven or to Pike County to cover this. Which at that point, I just told them, you have the reporter in your newsroom that got the evidence, that got this guy, at least in part, convicted. And it would be really stupid of us not to do that. And that's what I gave them. But to me, it was like, I will be there. So I went. And at one point, I was about to go live, and we have to write a script. And the producer called me and said, you don't need to say the name of every one of those victims. And I said, yes, I do. So my parting thought is this. I'm grateful that I knew William Durr. And even in death, I'm grateful that I got to know Barbara Mitchell and Brenda May and Takara May, who I'd written about before because she survived a really bad motorcycle wreck right after I became a reporter in Brookhaven. I'm so glad I got to learn about Jordan and about Austin and Farrell and Sheila. And I will always say all of their names when we tell this story because they are the ones that brought that community together. And yeah, I hope Corey dies alone. And as a matter of fact, I even said on Facebook one day when I knew he could read it, I said, you're going to die and I'm going to be there. Maybe I'm going to amend that and say, and I won't even know. So that's all we've got. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for tuning in. Meg, Durr, Cook, I love you too. And we will see you guys next week. We've got Derek Jordan coming, former JPD investigator. Now he's over at DPS, and he's going to be talking to us about another great big Jackson case, Mary Heather Spencer case. Thank you all for watching.